Welcome to another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Dr. Dave Peltz. We have our other co-host, Dr. Joe Hamlett. How are you doing today, Dr. Joe?
I'm doing very well, Dave. How are you doing?
Most excellent. We'd like to introduce our guest speaker for this week, Dr. Darnell Patton. How are you doing there, Doc?
I'm doing fine. Great. Thank you.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, so to kick this thing off, I've got my notes over here, so I'm not looking out the window. This is our guest speaker for this week, Dr. Darnell Patton. He's from Detroit, Michigan, and is a prolific and meticulous leader and scholar. He currently serves as a chief and advisor to one of our many government entities. Non-disclosure, we cannot disclose it. Secret. If we tell you, well, you know how the rest of that phrase goes. He's also, in his spare time, because we all have so much of that, he serves as an adjunct professor for the University of Charleston, West Virginia, and teaches their Masters of Science Strategic Leadership program. Because he's not busy enough as it is, he has also served 25 plus years in the Marine Corps for our U.S. military. And because he's a glutton for punishment like Dr. Joe and myself, he too has a doctorate degree. His is in management and organizational leadership. Still a glutton for punishment, not one, but two master's degree and two bachelor's degrees and an associate's degree on top of that. So apparently there's some sort of contest going on here that I was not aware of. So I think I need to go back to school, apparently.
I think you're right, Dave.
Yeah. And in addition to all those wonderful things, Dr. Darnell Patton also has his own show, or what do we want to call it? Presence on social media, and where you can find him if you look up the line "Authentic Leadership Inside the Mind of Dr. Patton," and hopefully we'll have a link and some information for you shortly. And that's our guest and our show. No, just kidding, it's not our show. So with
Thank you very much.
With that in mind, you're fitting right in, Doc. You're fitting right in. So with that, let's go ahead and get to our topic. And give me just a moment. Apparently, I was not as prepared as I normally am. So give me just a moment. We'll get that list of questions here for you. So in the meantime, Dr. Joe, would you like to chat with Dr. Patton?
I can go ahead and jump into it. I do have the list of questions here. And so to begin with, our topic that we're going to be discussing today is taking ownership, right? So we want to find out a little bit about what Dr. Darnell Patton thinks about taking ownership. So with that, I'm going to jump in with the very first question. Pretty easy, standard question, Doc. So how would you describe taking ownership?
Taking ownership is interesting because it's one of those areas where people try to avoid because it makes them feel accountable for something that they did instead of faulting somebody else for their actions. Because the bottom line is, when you take ownership, you take responsibility for your actions, and not only your actions, but you have to take responsibility for the outcome of those actions. So it's sort of like a domino effect. And in addition to that, you also have to consider who it affects, because one action that you take that may not be so popular doesn't just affect you. It affects your loved ones. It affects the people around you. It may affect coworkers. So it's a domino effect. So instead of being self-centered and trying to point the blame somewhere else, you have to own your mistake. You have to own everything that you do, good, bad, or indifferent. And it means it's yours to own. It is yours to fix. That doesn't mean you cannot get assistance with learning how to help take ownership of your issues. But you did it, you own it, instead of pointing a finger somewhere else. And it's no different than being in a leadership position. One thing you learn when you assume the role of a leader, everything is your fault. Everything is your fault.
Yeah.
Same rules apply in your life. You take ownership of everything that happens, and it's up to you how you rectify it.
Right.
That's
for that.
Yeah, that's a good way to introduce the topic. Joe, what are your thoughts on taking ownership?
So, you kind of throw fear out there to people when they think of taking ownership, because like you said, it's yours. Everything,
it's yours.
Not just you, but all the effects, second, third effects, order of effects that happen afterwards, and I think, again, as we think about stepping up and taking ownership, those things are in the back of most people's heads. And so, again, it's not just you that it's affecting, but it's all those people around you too. So that's a huge, like you say, when you step into this role or that position, all the cards on the table. It's all you now. And so I can see why people are hesitant and want to become the victim rather than the victor. So taking ownership is more than just a simple phrase in most cases. And I think that's part of the reason why people choose not to do that, just because it's on the surface, it sounds easy enough. I did it, I'll own up to it. But then we start looking at, like you say, that domino effect of all those things behind that decision that you made, then it can become overwhelming. And so, people being hesitant to that, that's probably why, just because it's, not just as easy as it seems. But like you said, leadership is not easy. And a lot of us think we're ready for it, but we're not. And so that's one piece of this whole thing, is you got to remain humble. You got to remain, comfortable with those decisions you make are yours. And typically you're not going to get that bailout for that decision. So, taking ownership is a lot more than just, saying it. It's about reacting, responding, being accountable for those things.
You made a comment that triggered a thought. People would take ownership if it's something nice or something pleasant, or, rewards may come. But as soon as there's adversity or something that's going to cause a little friction and tension, then they want to run from it. And that's not how it goes. You take the good with the bad. You own both of them. Give praise when praise is due, and own it when it's time to own it.
Yep. And I'm glad you both said it, the accountability and responsibility piece. And that's where I was going to jump in. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of folks, to your points, they want the leadership, they want that role, they want that position, and being accountable and taking that ownership and saying, yes, this is mine, this is my project or whatever. And as long as things are running great, everything is glorious. But along with that is the accountability to that ownership. You have to own the good and the not so good and the challenges that come out of it. So when to Dr. Patton's point, if things fall apart, you got to own that too. It's just part of the process. And you have to, those to me are not necessarily bad things. It's just they're opportunities for us to learn and grow. And so, taking ownership, that's a big part of everything that we do every day, from waking up to getting to work, whether that's driving or walking into the next room, whether that's making sure your audio and video equipment are ready for that next meeting, or whether it's making sure you're present in a meeting or in a training session. You have to own that as well. We can't just go by and check all the boxes and say, hey, we did it. That doesn't count for being an owner. You have to be involved and engaged as well. Yeah, good stuff. Okay, are we ready for the next question?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. So how could our viewers and listeners apply taking ownership to the professional environment? We'll get to the personal environment in just a moment, but what about for the professional side of things? How can we take ownership with that?
So from the professional side, a way a lot of organizations are set up, their intent is to train, mentor, and lead you and guide you to success so you can become successful. But the bottom line is the core of it falls with you. You have to take ownership for yourself. Like, you cannot rely on an organization, no matter how great they are, how successful they may be, to be the sole key in your progression. Mm-hmm. You have to control and own the progression that you want to take. You have to control and own the success that you want to achieve. In addition, wherever you are working, remind yourself of why you chose that particular job, why you're there. What impact do you want to make while you're there? Own it. What difference, if any, do you want to make? How do you fit in with your team? These are a lot of things you need to consider. Be proactive instead of reactive. Take that initiative and do what you think needs to be done instead of someone telling you what needs to be done. one key thing you need to consider also is managing up, because we tend to wait for, those who are superior than us to tell us what to do or give us guidance and give us direction. But sometimes it doesn't quite work out that way, and at the same time, they're not perfect. They make mistakes like everybody else, and they forget things too. So you manage up, utilize what you know, ask those questions, practice active communication, active listening. Those can also help. Balance your ideas with your team and express those ideas, and to include those other concerns. If you have any, be vocal, but at the same time, pick and choose your battles. Everything that takes place when you're trying to develop yourself is not always a battle. So you don't have to respond to every single thing that comes in your face. So you got to pick and choose those battles. Again, you got to make yourself number one. And what I mean by that does not mean, you take priority over your team, because as a team, you work and function together. But when it comes to, taking ownership in your progression and development, that is yours to own, not the organization's, even though it may be in something that you read, part of a contract or something like that. Or we would do this for you. We would send you to these schools. So what happens when they don't? What are you going to do to take control of yourself and take control and ownership of yourself to make sure that happens? One thing that's also essential is when you're trying to take ownership at work, and a lot of people are afraid of it, is receiving constructive criticism, that constructive feedback of ways you can improve. But also, let me clarify, feedback, or should I say criticism versus constructive criticism. So you understand what you're getting when you're trying to take ownership of yourself. So if you receive criticism, that's like me telling you, like, look, the way you perform this project that I assigned you to is horrible. You need work, you need guidance, go somewhere and find it, right? That's criticism. So constructive criticism, this is where your constructive feedback comes in, is, look, this project that I assigned you to, there's a lot of gaps in there. There's areas you need to work on. However, let me sit down with you and show you how to fill these gaps. So I'm going to walk you through the process to help you grow versus letting you throw you out there to fight with the wolves. So that's not what I'm not going to do. So understand the difference between constructive criticism and criticism. And also something you want to consider is whatever career goals you have, communicating with your leadership. Let them know what your long-term goals are, if you know what they are. And those are just a few of the things that you can do to take ownership of yourself in a working environment.
Dr. Patton, you said a few things early on that really were key. And that's, when you're talking about managing up and taking the initiative, that resonated with me when I'm talking with my students, and it reminded me of the doctoral program. And in the undergraduate and bachelor's program, your master's and graduate program, there tends to be direction. There tends to be a word count, a page count, something like that. In the doctoral program, and I explained this to my students, they're like, well, how many pages did you write on a paper? And I'm like, that's the good question. That's the magic question, because when we asked that to our professors, they said the same thing. However long it takes. It's not like it has to be 5 pages or 500. You determine that length. You determine that direction, the trajectory, and you take ownership of that. If you believe you've covered it well enough and you've done your job well enough, then that's good. You've made it. And if not, then revisit it and figure out what you need to do to fill in the gaps that are missing. And to your point, if you need assistance, own it and ask for it. None of us are perfect, especially now in the digital age. We're finding that out more and more, where humanity is lacking in knowledge. So owning that and really pushing it to the limits, I think, is important. Push your boundaries of what comfortable is, so you can grow in that ownership. It's not working within your sandbox saying, oh, I'm perfect at this, but I don't want to address any of these other areas that I'm not comfortable in. Take ownership. And to your point again, own your career, own your trajectory, own your direction. Yeah.
I want to jump back in there too. Dr. Darnell Patton, you said, a lot of us think we go into work, or we expect that our organization is going to prepare, is going to take care of, is going to give us those tools we need to develop and grow. And I think that's the easy way out when we think that that's going to occur for us or happen for us, but it doesn't. And so then we have some scapegoat. We can blame it on them. They didn't prepare me. They didn't develop me. They didn't, get me to that next level. And so, again, that comes back to that accountability, responsibility. If we think about where we want to go, then we're going to make that decision to do those things we need to. But a lot of times we rely on someone else to dictate those things for us. And then again, that's the easy way out, because now we can say, well, they didn't do it. They didn't get this for me. They didn't provide this. But that's all part of that taking, ownership of your direction. And you just said it, Dave, your career, where you're going, where you want to go. That's all on you. Nobody can dictate that. And the other piece of that, and Dave touched on it too, was, the idea that we manage up. A colleague of mine just mentioned that to me a couple of weeks ago, and I do a good job of managing up. And again, if you want to have a say, be able to provide input to what's going to happen, then you got to do that. And again, unless you're going to want to sit back and say, well, that's what they gave me. If you want to be active, if you want to take ownership in your future, or a future of your organization, or whatever it is, then you got to be willing to take the initiative, step up, say the things that you think are right, at least provide that information. And if it comes to that point or fact that they don't use it, you still done your part. You still don't sit back and say, well, I didn't do anything, so I can't expect anything, but you did do something. You contributed. And again, they may take it and move down the path to a different direction. But again, still taking ownership and putting that information out there. That's no different than you being a senior leader, again, in the military, and you tell your commander or your leader, hey, these are my thoughts. That commander or leader may choose to say, okay, thanks, but I'm still going to go down this path. But at least, again, you've done your part, taking ownership, taking initiative, and put those things out there.
Yeah, so, and I really liked how Dr. Darnell mentioned it. It can be job specific too. Managing up is one piece of it, but managing and taking ownership of your current position is very important. A lot of times we can either observed ourselves or heard the stories of people kind of just sitting there and not doing much, and trying to figure out why things are not working for them in the workplace, instead of taking that initiative, taking that ownership and saying, hey, I've got an issue, and going out and seeking those answers, researching it, looking online, talking to your peers and colleagues, talking to other leaders and other managers and colleagues in other departments or within your own team, and find out what's missing and take ownership of it. It's easy to own something. Everyone knows this. It's easy to own something that works great and perfect. I mean, that's the easy one. The challenging part is taking ownership of the areas where we need assistance, because a lot of people think it's a negative or looks poorly upon them if they ask for assistance. And it's my belief, and Joe and I have talked about this in the past, if you don't know, you have to ask. It does not reflect well on you if you try to wing your way through things, and guess your way through it. If you don't know, find out one way or another, find out what you need to know.
And what you're talking about when you just mentioned about asking for assistance, which is true, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because at some point everybody needs help, right? And you even said it where when you need help, people look at it as a sign of weakness, but actually it's just the opposite, because you're showing a strength that you actually care about what you're trying to do and what you're trying to accomplish. So if someone comes to me and say, hey, I don't understand this, I am actually glad that, because it's like, okay, fine. Well, if I don't understand, let's figure this out together. Let's do it together. Because if you're sitting there not understanding, what you're giving me is going to be wrong, or you're going to sit there and give me not give me anything. And, that's not what I want. So, people look at that as something negative, and it's, that part is kind of a sensitive topic to me, and you both will be able to relate to this. And I mentioned this a little while ago. Think back to the military, right? When go back 10, 15, maybe even 20 plus years when PTSD was not a thing per se.
Right.
Or when, people would come back from combat or other situations, the thought of seeking help, it came with the stigma. People looked at you sideways, you got ostracized, and then you were slowly succumbing and dying on the inside. And now the thought of in the military today, and it even applies to just life in general, seeking help is actually beneficial. It helps your mental place. It helps your mental state. It helps you and allow you to do things that you need to do, whether it's in the working environment or in your home life, your personal life. So seeking help, in all parameters and aspects of your life will only help you mentally, physically, and emotionally.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Those are excellent points, Dr. Darnell. Yeah, the asking for help is it on so many different levels it can be applied on so many different levels, and taking that ownership to recognize and accept those things where we might fall short, that's part of being a leader. Whether it's self-leadership or managing your team, if you can show that you do not know everything, that to me is a display of confidence and a confident and secure leader. Because as leaders, the job of a leader is not to know everything about everything.
Right.
It's about knowing who to go to for what you need to get the job done, or to get the team through the next project, or how to develop the next program. And that's really what it's about. To me, when I hear taking ownership, that means confidence. And if you have the confidence to ask the questions, then that's nothing short of an aspect of excellence. So, all right.
All right, so it's up on me again.
It looks like
for
it's
the
on you.
next question. All right, so the next question is very similar to the previous question. This is more in reference to the personal environment. So how could our viewers and listeners apply taking ownership to the personal environment? How do we change that up a little bit?
That's interesting, because first, in any environment, taking ownership is really a mindset, right?
Right.
So in your personal environment, there's so many factors that needs to be considered, from as you were growing up as a child to all the experience that you had, as a teenager, and even your early adulthood, depending on how old you are. There's so many things to consider. So there's so many obstacles that may have been put in front of you that may cause you to think a certain way, or may cause you to have certain, reaction to certain things. So it's about owning your mindset. And it's about accepting the fact that I am ready to make that change. I am ready to own my actions and be responsible. So there's a lot of things that you have to consider, because I've known too many people, when something happens, good, bad, or indifferent, it could be the slightest thing, it's somebody else's fault. Oh, let's not forget that you failed to plan why things fell apart, but you blame it on somebody else, who may have was supposed to cover the cost of these activities. So there's so many things to consider. So one, notice your blaming tendencies. When something happens, process it. Allow your mind to process, and allow your mind to be free, and look at it from both sides. Look at it from, by default, these people who have not taken control and ownership of their life, they tend to default to the negative side. So stop that for a moment, and let's focus on the positive side. So if you can't stop that portion, okay, fine, think about the negative. But when you're done with that, and you're done with your pity party, then think about the positive side. Because no matter how the circumstances are, there's always silver lining in every circumstance.
Thank you for saying that, Dr. Darnell.
Absolutely.
The problem is people refuse to see it. It exists, and there may be multiple silver linings that exist, but people don't want to see it. So notice your blaming tendencies, because those type of people tend to blame others on knee-jerk reactions. And then what makes it even worse, if somebody buy into your story or buy into your narrative, and then so whatever they say to you kind of support what you already believe. No, find somebody in your corner who's going to tell you the truth. Find somebody who's going to tell you the things that you don't want to hear. Those are the people you should be listening to. Because think about it, if you got a certain group that you follow that tends to agree with every narrative that you say, and you already know you're a negative person, you might need to change your group of friends or the people you hang around.
Yep.
Because they're buying into your narrative, for one. For two, they don't have your best interests at heart, because they don't care about you growing and taking ownership. Because the people who will tell you the truth that may hurt your feelings in the process, those are the people who you need to listen to. Those are ones who really care about you, versus all the other people who just pretending to be your friend, or maybe you do stuff for them, or you cover the tab when they go out. So of course they get something in return, you know. So these are a lot of things to consider. So process your thoughts and find a silver lining in it. And then when things happen, okay, this may not have went the way I wanted. Okay, focus on the solution. Instead of blaming and blaming and blaming, okay, what are you going to do to rectify this? How are you going to make the progress and say, okay, let me try to figure this out. Okay, let me go through some resources, people who can help me solve this problem. So own it, and figure it out. Figure it out. Practice your power of choice. You have a choice with the way your mind thinks. And if you are surrounded, people would say, I'm surrounded by negativity, maybe it's you. Maybe you are.
Maybe you need to change your environment. To your point, maybe, and we've all experienced this, especially at the doctoral level. You know, when it's inherent to that process that you're going to meet new people and different people. And sometimes your peer group is going to change throughout your life, and invariably it will. You know, the people I went to high school with, you know, I rarely hear from many of them, and that's not a good or a bad. It's just, it is what it is, and that's part of growing. So, to your point, you might have to change your peer group. You might have to change the people that you associate with, because, to your point again, maybe they're being that yes person instead of providing you that critical feedback that you need.
And you're right about that, because me, I don't like negative energy. I don't. Right. I distance myself from those. Like, you get that person who may call you on the phone, or
we've had enough of that in our lives, I'm sure.
Right. So it's all negative. So they call you complaining about X, Y, and Z, and it's like, I really don't want to hear this. Like, because every time I talk to you, you're complaining about something.
Right.
You know, so you don't want that energy in your life. Now, granted, that doesn't mean you get rid of all these people in your life. But once you learn how to take control of yourself and control your mind, that negativity won't sway you to think negative as well. At that point, that person that's calling you with the negativity needs a voice of reason. Now you are supposed to be the voice of reason and put them in their place. Yep. And if they don't want to hear it, then shame on them. That's something that they have to learn and grow and learn how to take control of their mind in that aspect. So bottom line, be accountable. And understand that you're going to be uncomfortable a lot of times. Right. You're going to be uncomfortable a lot of times, because by default, you want to sway what you go in the direction that you're used to. And that's that negativity, because it pacifies you for the moment, because you figure, well, I don't own nothing, I have no responsibility. But again, as I alluded earlier, it's a domino effect. It doesn't just affect you. It affects all of those that are close to you. And who it doesn't affect are those people who's buying into your narrative. It doesn't affect them in any way, shape, or form, because they conform to your narrative and what you say. And I think one of the last things I want to talk about, as far as this goes, and this may be an age thing or whatever, but social media. Social media can be your demise. Yeah, you know, there's so many negative things on social media, whether, like, if you look at an article, the headline of the article is negative, but if you read the article, you realize it's not that bad. Or you get on there and vent and talk about your whole life and how horrible it is. And then, are you doing it for sympathy? Because somebody can say, oh, that's bad. But again, you're telling one side of the story. You know, I don't post on social media that much, especially on my personal page. And for two, I don't post my personal life on that page. I don't complain about nothing. You will not know what's going on in my life personally on social media. I guarantee that. You may know I may have taken
the social enigma of Dr. Darnell Patton.
Right? You may know if I took a trip. You may know if I, but as far as my personal life, that's only for a selective few. Yeah. That it's not social media worthy, and it will never make it to social media. If you don't want nobody in your business, don't air your laundry on social media.
Yep. Dr. Joe, I think you had some comments.
Yeah, I just want to go back. I mean, that was excellent, because, you know, it got me started right when you said, you know, you Now I lost my train of thought. But going back to the mindset, yes, going back to your mindset, that starts it all. That and it leads down that path of you taking control of your life. You end up maybe with less friends or less support. And that was a question asked to me years ago by a group of people. They asked me, as you start going down this path of changing your mindset and getting to where you want to go, does that mean you start to lose friends and family members and all that? And in reality, it does, because you realize some of those people are holding you down. Some of those people are the negative Nancy's, and those people that all they want to do is, continue to spew out that negativity. And so for you to continue to go forward, advance, move forward, take control of your life, in most cases, you're going to have to let those type of people go, because it doesn't make sense for you to try. Dave said it, I've got friends from years ago that I haven't talked to in a long time, and not just because I don't like them anymore, but it's just we've changed where we're headed. And so, changing our mindset is absolutely going to change the way we view things. And in most cases, we're going to look at it and say, that doesn't fit anymore. That doesn't work for me anymore. So maybe it's time for me to move on to a new group of people, or new people with different ideas that are more aligned with mine. And so, you said take control of your life. And that's actually one of my mantras, or whatever you want to call it, my taglines on my website. It's take control of your life, because once you again change your mindset to positive things, that's where you end up taking control of your life, and you look at things differently. Again, you can, and me and Dave have talked about this on previous shows or episodes, victim or victor. You can choose to let those things that happen to you, you can, woe is me, or you can waller in it, or you can take a look at it, see what went wrong, and then try improve upon it. And now you become the victor, because you turn that negative thing into a positive thing. And so that's why, that mindset piece is the biggest part. And I think you said early on too, a lot of people don't, we can provide, me and Dave say this all the time, this Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast is just that. We can provide you all these tools, all these things to help you move forward. But if you don't accept it yourself, then you're not going to go anywhere. It doesn't matter if we give you an exact blueprint on how to get something. If you choose not to, apply those things or use those things, then we can't do anything for you. So that's why I just really go back to the mindset piece. It's the most powerful thing to get you to move forward. Even, me and David talked about, just some people, it's hard to even just get out of bed every day. And so once they change their mindset to believe, if I take one step out of the bed, take one step today, take another step tomorrow, then they've won. Again, they're not the victim anymore. They've chosen that I'm going to move forward by taking these steps and taking that ownership. Yeah, it may not appear to be big to everybody else, but to me, this is big. And that's when that mind starts to figure out, I don't need these things. I don't need that. These are the things I need in my life. These are the things that are going to help me propel and move to the next level. That's kind of where I want to go with that.
Very well said, Dr. Joe and Dr. Darnell. We've got about 2 minutes left to wrap things up. So, Dr. Darnell, any final thoughts on taking ownership?
Well, bottom line is, again, it comes down to your mindset, and you have to want to do it. You can sit there and say, oh, yeah, and talk about it, but you got to be about it. You have to sit there and say, you know what, I'm done talking about it. I'm going to actually take action. And as one just alluded to, it doesn't matter how small the step is forward.
Yep.
As long as there's a step.
Absolutely.
Take your time if you have to, baby steps. And sometimes you may take 2-3 steps back, but make sure you take 4 or 5 steps forward to offset it and keep going forward, because some journeys are not easy. Some are more difficult than others.
Wait,
understand that.
Some journeys are not easy? Wait, what? Where's that coming from? I don't understand. I thought everything's supposed to be easy.
Right? And some are more difficult than others. So, you're gonna be faced with roadblocks, adversity,
Yeah.
and you're gonna be faced with those people you're used to, trying to bring you back down to that corner that you were in. That is when you change your circle. That is when you find a new group of friends, or do it solo until you can find that group of people who can carry you to that next level. Again, sometimes you have to change those surroundings, and it may be close family members, it may be a loved one or a significant other. Change your environment. If you stay in that constant environment, you're never going to make progress.
Yeah.
Right.
Well said. Dr. Joe, final thoughts?
No, I concur with everything Dr. Darnell just said. It really, again, mindset. If your environment is not contributing to or attributing to your success, then you might have to change that environment, because taking ownership, it is all about you. It is not about anybody else. We can't sit back and say, well, they said, they didn't do, it's all on you. Everything that happens to you in your life. Again, if you want to get to a position where you take control of your life, it means taking full control of your life, the good, the bad, the barriers, the roadblocks, all those things, not just the good times, but it's the bad times as well. So, all those things.
And it's those bad times is where you grow the most.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Well said, gentlemen. I think it can be, from what I've listened to, it's taking control is about a mindset and taking action. So that's how I'm kind of summarizing it in my head, and no one else can do it for you. It's something you got to do for yourself. Yeah. So that being said, we'd like to thank our viewers and listeners for joining us for another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast. We'd like to thank our special guest, Dr. Darnell Patton, for joining us today and sharing his insights and thoughts on taking ownership. If you'd like to follow and learn more about Dr. Patton, you can do so at Authentic Leadership Inside the Mind of Dr. Patton. Don't be afraid. It's not as dark and scary as you might think. There is some light in there. Follow the light. It's not a train. So with that, thank you again. If you like and enjoyed what you saw and heard today, like, share, follow, all those great, wonderful things. And until next time, keep on being your not so ordinary you.
Awesome.